We will now discuss Section 9, Repeatability Exercises. This is a continuation of Section 8, where we discussed how to determine if repeatability was an issue or not. If you haven't seen the previous section, please do so now before continuing. Let's start with Exercise 15. Exercise 15 states the following. Tallyflex has a CFM machine for diameter measurements. We want to use this system for measuring parts with a tolerance of 1.25 plus minus 0.005 inches. Does this system meet our repeatability rule? To test it out, we are providing it with a golden sample that measures exactly 1.30 inches, and we're using the same inspector for all inspections. So all the results are shown here. We will now take our information. We'll paste it over into a brand new worksheet. We will proceed to do stat, basic, one sample t-test, C-tree, and our golden sample measures 1.30 inches. From here, we can review our information. I'm going to copy the information as a picture, as shown right here. I'm going to copy this as a picture as well. Since my p-value is above 0.05, I know that the system is not biased. So first, check mark. Next, I'm going to ask myself, well, how repeatable is it? For that, we're simply going to do stat basic display. I'm going to select my C-tree column, and I'm going to review my output. Here, I have my mean and my standard deviation. The mean is around 1.30. The standard deviation is 0.00032. I'm going to copy this output. So let's do copy as picture, and we can paste it here as my next output. Now, the overall tolerance that I want to measure is plus minus 0.005. So for this, to make it cleaner, let's copy this output shown here. So 3 times my standard deviation, which in this case is 0.00032, which I'm going to round out to 0.0003, needs to be less than or equal to 20% of the tolerance. The tolerance being plus minus 0.005. If I continue with the calculations as shown before, I'll do 0.0009 divided by 0.005 must be less than or equal to 20%. After calculations are finalized, I get 0.18 multiplied by 100, that is 18%. So 18% is in fact less than 20%. As such, we know that the system is repeatable enough to measure the proposed tolerance. In the answer section, the system has a standard deviation of 0.003. After doing the calculations, the system eats up around 18% of the overall tolerance. The system can be measured with this tolerance can be measured with this system. Okay. Now, some of you might say, well, if you had a couple of extra decimals, would have it still passed or failed? That will be up to the engineer to decide. Remember, it's not a golden rule. If I had gotten, let's say, 20.1%, would I have passed or failed the system? Most likely, I would have passed it. As a practical real-world example, we've seen systems that are still acceptable with up to 30% of the overall repeatability being absorbed. But we do recommend that you keep it as low as possible. Okay. Now, let's do exercise 16. Another one of Tallyflex machines is being analyzed for repeatability. It will be used for a diameter measurement with tolerances of 0.785 plus minus 0.005. Does this machine meet the repeatability rule? You can pause the video right now to try and do it on your own. Otherwise, please just give me 3 seconds and I'll provide you with the answer. Okay, we're simply going to copy our information as shown here. We're going to paste it on a brand new mini tab worksheet. And since we're only going to do repeatability, I'm only going to calculate the standard deviation. So C3. There we go. I'm going to copy my information as a picture as shown here. And now we're going to do our calculations. So after calculating our standard deviation, we will now proceed to calculate whether we meet or exceed the repeatability rule. For that, we're going to do 3 sigma, which will be 3 times 0.00035, needs to be less than or equal to 20% of 0.005. From here, we're simply going to do 0.00035 times 3 divided by 0.005. We multiplied this by 100 to get it as a percentage, and this leaves us with 21%. 21% is higher than 20%, and as such, we would not recommend this system for this particular tolerance. However, it is very close to the golden rule, and you might make the case that if you do not have the resources to purchase an additional machine, well, we'll have to live with this option. It would have been something very different if we had gotten, let's say, 40% or 50% of the overall tolerance. At that point, it's not worth it to continue with this system. So here in the answer section, this system is not recommended because it uses more than 20% of the overall tolerance. However, it is quite close to the rule. So a case can be made for using it if no alternatives exist. Okay. Again, we are not recommending using this system, but sometimes 20, 21, 22% can still be considered to be acceptable. However, it is very different if you're at 40, 50, or 60% of the amount of tolerance that you're eating up. Okay. Now we're going to do exercise number 17. 17 is an on your own exercise. So please try and pause the video right now and take a couple of minutes to do this exercise on your own. For now, I'm going to cover it in a couple of seconds. Okay, so let's say we have the following 3 machines and I'm analyzing them for a length measurement of 15 inches plus minus 2 inches. Do all the machines meet the repeatability rule? Well, for this, I'm going to copy my information and we're going to paste it over into a brand new mini tab worksheet. Next up, we're going to determine their standard deviation. So I'm going to do C3, C4, and C5. I'm going to copy my output and we're going to paste it right here. Okay, so pretty much all of them have around the same standard deviation. Well, except actually for EN014, which is a lot worse than the first ones. So if I look at EN012 and EN013, they have similar values, not exact, but similar enough. But EN014 is way off. Now, what tolerance am I trying to measure with this system? It's plus minus 2 inches. So since this is plus minus 2 inches, I'm now going to do the calculations for each one individually. So let's copy this output. Okay, and for EN012, we're going to have the following. 3 times its standard deviation of 0.10, just going to round it up, 0.10, needs to be less than or equal to 20% of 2 inches. For EN012, let's do EN013, needs to be 3 times 0.078, there we go, needs to be less than or equal to 20% of 2 inches. And lastly, for EN014, 3 times the standard deviation of 0.738 needs to be less than or equal to 20% of 2 inches. So let's finish up our calculations. 3 times 0.10 divided by 2, that will be 0.15 multiplied by 100, that is 15%. So this one passes. Next up, we have 0.078 times 3 divided by 2 multiplied by 100. This is 11.7%. So again, this one passes as well. Last up, 3 times 0.738 divided by 2 multiplied by 100. That is 110.70%. As such, it fails. So in conclusion, in the answer section, we would state machines EN012 and EN013 meet the repeatability rule by using less than 20% of the overall tolerance, while machine EN014 is not recommended for this particular use. Again, it does not mean that I need to throw out machine EN014. There might be other use cases for it. Let's say a part that measures plus minus 10 inches or plus minus 20 inches. However, as quality engineers, we must ask ourselves, are EN012, 013, and 014 the same type of machine and the same model? Because if they are, we would have expected them to behave the same. This sometimes gives us a red flag that something might be off with machine 14, and it might be worth sending it over into maintenance for them to check if some components are not damaged or some sensors are not miscalibrated.